Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Marlin Model 60SB stainless semi-automatic .22 rifle. This is the Marlin Model 60SB .22 stainless steel rifle with a walnut-colored Monte Carlo stock. After 60 years and more than 11 million rifles sold, there's no doubt that the American-made Model 60 was probably the world's most popular .22 rimfire rifle ever made. By comparison, only about 7 million of the well-known and popular Ruger 10-22 rifle were produced within the same time. While the which is better argument continues between the passionate owners of these two iconic rifles, Marlin won the title of the most sold in an undisputed landslide. However, ironically, it was Ruger that eventually bought Marlin in 2020 and decided that having two rifles in production wasn't needed, and so, predictably and sadly, shut down production of the Marlin Model 60. When I was just a kid, I had a neighbor friend who had a new tube-fed .22 Marlin that we used to shoot at a range in his basement, believe it or not. Now personally, I've always been a bit partial to the Ruger 10-22. The 10-22 was my first rifle. I preferred its rotary-fed and larger capacity magazines over the tube-fed magazine of the Marlin. But I sold off my early 10-22 way back in the 70s. To be honest, I was bored with it and needed the money. Then about 25 years later, I bought a Ruger Charger, a cut-down version of the 10-22 carbine. I thought our kids would enjoy it. They didn't. So eventually I traded that for this tactical Charger version a few years ago. I've done a lot of modifications to this gun, but it remains one of my most favorite guns. Now, all that being said, I've been toying with the idea of getting a carbine version of the 10-22 again, just for fun. It's been on my wish list for more than a year. I've been waiting for the right deal. So when I saw the stainless steel Marlin Model 60SB, I had to pause and think about it a bit. I knew the Marlin 60 was popular, and this one could be mine for a reasonable price, but then I knew I could rely on Ruger, and my Charger 10-22 magazines, of which I have a bunch, were interchangeable. In the end, I went with the Marlin. I liked that it was stainless steel, I liked its looks, I liked most of its features, I liked its price, but I was also curious about what made the Marlin Model 60 so popular. Now let's make sure this gun is cleared first, and by the way, if you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Marlin Firearms Company is an American manufacturer best known for its semi-automatic lever action and bolt action rifles. However, early on, Marlin also produced shotguns, derringers, and revolvers. And during World War I, Marlin became one of the largest machine gun producers in the world for the U.S. and its allies, building the M1895 Colt Browning machine gun and a later variant called the Marlin gun, optimized for aircraft use. As for the Marlin Model 60 .22 rifle, the Model 60 was produced between 1960 till 2020, ironically for 60 years. The Model 60SB, like this one, is one of 8 submodels, and what makes it unique from the standard Model 60 is that it's made of stainless steel. 3 major features of the Model 60s include its micro-groove rifling that carves 16 grooves in the bore for improved accuracy because the bullet is not as severely deformed while traveling down the barrel and downrange. Second, there's a grooved receiver for scope mount, and third is its last shot bolt hold open system, meaning that the bolt will be held in the rearward open position after the final spent casing is ejected. Overall, the Model 60 has been sold in over 35 variants. There are 19 to 22-inch barrel lengths, loading tubes for 14 to 18 rounds, walnut and birch stocks, as well as different sights and finishes. But in my opinion, the Marlin Model 60's receiver has always had a distinctive profile, making it easy to identify. In 2007, the Remington Arms Company purchased Marlin, and when Remington went in bankruptcy in 2020, it was bought by Ruger, and the production of the Marlin Model 60 was discontinued. This particular Marlin Model 60 can be dated to 2002, making it about 20 years old. How do I know that? From the Marlin serial number reference code. That also suggests that this one was produced just before the Model 60's barrels were shortened to 19 inches. And did you know that technically it's the length of the barrel that determines whether it's a rifle or a carbine? As I understand, less than 20 inches and it's a carbine. As you can probably guess, historically, shortening of rifle barrels had to do with soldiers on horseback handling and reloading rifles. So technically this rifle with its 22-inch barrel is still a rifle. But when Marlin shortened the barrel to 19 inches, it could be considered a carbine. I think that's interesting. This 20-year-old Marlin 60 semi-automatic rifle, as the 60SB model, was produced in stainless steel with a walnut-colored Monte Carlo stock with a pistol grip. It has a 22-inch barrel and 14-round capacity loading tube. By the way, I should point out that the stock may look like walnut, but it's just a hardwood, probably birch stained walnut. And while the crosshatch texturing on this stock is a nice touch, it isn't actually carved, but rather it's pressed. Still, overall, it's a nice looking gun. The Marlin Model 60 is designed to shoot .22 long rifle only. Action is semi-automatic. Magazine is 14+1 rounds, tube fed. Weight is 5.5 pounds. Overall length is 40.75 inches. Barrel length is 22 inches. The front sight is ramped, and originally it was hooded. This one appears to have lost its hood. It's just a clip-on and is therefore easily lost. I could replace it, but at $200, probably not. Originally, replacements would have cost only $8. Don't you wish you would have bought a bunch of those back then? Anyways, I'm planning to add a scope, and honestly, $200 is more than I even paid for the gun. The rear sight is semi-buckhorn, which means we have a metal or iron sight with an adjustable ladder here. Don't be surprised if the ladder has been lost and is missing on a used Model 60. I'm told that along with the missing front sight hood, that's fairly common. The safety is cross-bolt. As for packaging, the Marlin 60 came in a cardboard box with a little packing foam. Nothing fancy. I've had this rifle for a few months, and I've got to say, what a nice little 22 it is. I own a bunch of 22 firearms. I like 22s. They're usually inexpensive to buy and inexpensive to operate, and usually they're fun. That would certainly be true of this Marlin Model 60. Yeah, I know, it's basically a no-frills 22 rifle, but it actually has all you really need. 14 rounds load easily, and a quarter turn on the rod locks them in, releasing the bolt. And racking the receiver is easy and smooth. Light enough, but good solid feel. These sights work just fine. Before shooting, I disassembled this rifle to check that it was safe to fire. Although very dirty, everything looked okay except for the plastic recoil buffer, which was basically non-existent. You can see here where the charging handle has damaged the lower left corner of the ejection port. That comes from the bolt overshooting the recoil buffer when fired. From the looks of it, this has probably been going on for a long time. Replacement recoil buffers are around $10 for a pack of 2. They're 3D printed plastic today, but they work. The trigger is okay, but not quite what I'd hoped for on such a popular gun. There's a 1/4-inch take-up, then about a 5-pound wall, but a bit gritty. On a budget no-frill 22 rifle, I can live with it. This gun is also pretty quiet. Recoil is light. Good feel overall. I've shot a mix of ammo, probably about 500 rounds total so far. Only a couple of failures with the ammo and not one problem with the gun. It'll fire as fast as you can pull the trigger, and accuracy is excellent. By the way, in forums and even in the Marlin manual, there's no definitive answer on the question of dry firing the Model 60, but following the commonly accepted rule of thumb, that rim-fired gun should not be dry-fired, I loaded in a few 22 long rifle dummy rounds for demonstration purposes during this review. I know people who pull the trigger on a spent shell to release spring tension to store their Model 60s. But personally, I don't believe that occasionally dry firing the Model 60 would really be a big problem. Just don't overdo it. This gun is over 20 years old and the firing pin and chamber still look like new. Remember that the early Model 60s didn't even have a last round hold open feature and as such would have been regularly dry fired. As for scopes, note that these dovetail grooves on the receiver for attaching a scope are a primary feature of the Marlin Model 60, and you commonly see 4x rifle scopes on these guns. Here's an original equipment Marlin scope that would have been available with the Marlin Model 60. You can still buy this scope for about $15 new, and I think it gives the gun that classic look. But if I'm going to add a scope, I'd like something a little better. I picked this Daisy Powerline scope up for about $25 last year. It came with 3/8 inch dovetail medium height mounts, and with its 3 to 9 power, it would make for a pretty good 22 rifle scope. But I think I'll add this silver Pitney 3.9x40 rifle scope instead, mainly because its color is a better match for this gun. It cost me about $40. Unfortunately, I had to replace the Weaver mounts that came with it with silver dovetail mounts for another $15, but I like its looks better. The mounts are a little higher than I wanted, but shorter ones just weren't available. When shooting, these mounts actually provide a nice and comfortable scope presentation for me, so I'm happy with them. It's a nice scope for the money, very similar to the Powerline scope here, and although it came with elastic string caps, I upgraded to Butler Creek flip-up lens covers for about another $20. We're here at the best indoor range in my area. However, with a maximum distance of 75 feet, I'm afraid we won't be able to really take advantage of this rifle's true capabilities, but that's just the way it is. Also, I can do pretty well with my camera with distant targets, but running two cameras can get a little tricky, so sometimes I mess up, especially the further the target. That was the case this trip. A tiny nudge and I lost the image. I didn't know that until I reviewed the film, but accuracy of the Marlin Model 60 has never been in question anyway. And I also freely admit the Model 60's abilities far exceed my own personal skills. Starting out, the scope was just a little off. Not surprising because I had to remove it for transport. I really need to get a larger carrying case for my scoped rifles. Once adjusted, I was spot on. Well within a 2-inch spread at 75 feet. Not bad. Overall, I like the Marlin Model 60. Good feel. Trigger's a little gritty, but operationally, very solid. Nice rifle. My main complaint when shooting the Model 60 is its trigger. More of an annoyance, really. While not horrible, it's not great either. Probably 5 to 6 pound pull and slightly gritty, but not a big deal. If this is important to you, there is an upgrade from Diversified Innovative Products you might want to check out. You might expect me to rate this nice looking checkered stock as a pro, but as a walnut colored press stock, close up it comes off as a bit cheap looking to me, so it's a bit of a disappointment. Of course, that certainly doesn't detract from the rifle's function. For the money, what did you honestly expect? There's no takedown version of the Model 60 either, like there is of the Ruger 1022. Also, it's been reported that the receiver's internal buffering system is prone to damage when using hotter ammo. With few exceptions, the Model 60 doesn't usually come with sling mounts. Some don't like the tube-fed ammo system, which limits ammo capacity, and probably most importantly, unlike the Ruger 1022 for example, there are relatively few aftermarket accessories sold for the Model 60, so the Marlin 60 is basically what it is. As for pros, the Marlin Model 60SB, like this one, is made of stainless steel. Great for all-weather use. I like that. The Model 60 is a simple design, but well made. There are many reports of people shooting thousands of rounds without ever cleaning and no problems, but the takedown system and cleaning procedures are fairly simple. In fact, you're unlikely to ever need the services of a gunsmith. There are plenty of videos out there on complete disassembly requiring only a screwdriver, and the Model 60 parts are readily available as well. The Model 60's micro groove rifling means the Model 60 is very accurate. It has a grooved receiver for scope mount, and you've got to appreciate that last shot bolt hold open system. which you'll find on Model 60s produced after about the mid-80s. Not only are most parts still available for the Model 60, despite slight design changes spanning 60 years, there is general backwards compatibility of nearly all internal parts. Good to know as these guns age. Now, I said that the aftermarket accessories for the Model 60 are very limited, but in my case, I already have a modified tactical 10-22. What I wanted here was just a basic semi-automatic 22 rifle that would shoot straight and to which I could add a scope if I wanted. As for adding a sling, well, sling swivels are readily available for about $15, so I may just do that. By the way, did you know that there's a speed loader solution available for the tube-fed rifles? Here's one made by Ludex, which allows for 120 rounds of long rifle to be preloaded into multiple speed loading tubes. Cuts loading time down to about 3 seconds. Pretty cool. Finally, the price of the Marlin Model 60 is right. Even back in their day, the Marlin Model 60 was very competitively priced, and though they might be costing a bit more today, there are plenty of these Model 60s out there, so you've got a decent chance of finding a good one. Begin field stripping by making sure the chamber is empty and the gun is cleared. Start by removing the brass inner magazine tube. With the rifle cocked and bolt half open, press the bolt release lever to close the bolt. Turn the rifle over and remove these 2 standard head trigger guard takedown screws to release the trigger assembly. The Phillips head screw behind the trigger guard stays in place. Remove the main takedown screw here. You can now lift the stock up and off the receiver and barrel assembly. Next, pull the plastic assembly post pin out of the rear of the receiver. This should free the action assembly and the rear of the hammer mechanism should pop up. Pull it backwards, freeing the 2 little ears at the front, and off it comes. To remove the bolt, pull it rearward for about 1/4 inch. Pull down on the rear of the bolt. The front of the bolt should rise out of the receiver slightly. That will free the charging handle, which will probably just fall out. Because the bolt itself is under tension from the recoil spring, hold it tightly and pull it out of the receiver along with the recoil spring and guide. That's it. This is as far as you need to go for cleaning purposes. The hammer mechanism is held together with C-clips. Unless you've got a broken spring or the recoil buffer is damaged, there's no need to take this apart. I just use CLP and Q-tips to clean this as it is. In this case, the recoil buffer is almost completely gone here, so I'm going to go ahead and replace it. To do so, lay it on its side with the C-rings facing up with the buffer to the left. Use a paper clip or a piece of wire to hook through the hole on the hammer strut like this. This will capture the hammer spring and make things easier. Then press the lever attached to the bottom, or the left side plate, just to the right of the buffer. This will release the hammer and release the tension on the hammer spring. If you have a bolt catch, use a pick to pop the bolt catch spring off its pin. Move the ejector spring off the side of the feed throat block here to reduce its tension. Now carefully remove all 4 C-clips. They can go flying, so I'll do this within a plastic bag. You should be able to lift the side plate off the assembly now. The recoil buffer goes on with the higher end facing toward the center of the assembly. Return the plate, making sure all the pins line up. The hammer strut, hammer spring pin may require a little jiggling. Carefully return the C-rings. Replacement C-rings will cost you about $5 each. Return the ejector spring to its location on the feed throat block. Return the bolt catch spring to its pin. Return the hammer to its flat position to loosen the wire you added to the strut. Now you can remove the wire and you're all done. Cleaned up and with the new recoil buffer installed, we can now reassemble. By the way, I'll just say that given how dirty the action receiver were on this rifle, I'm willing to bet that this may well be the first time it's ever been cleaned, let alone disassembled. But it cleaned up easily and it looks good as new now. Reassemble in reverse order of disassembly. Begin with reinstalling the recoil spring and guide along with the bolt. Be careful with the recoil spring that it doesn't get bent, which is a common problem. Put the recoil spring into the rod and insert the loose end of the spring into the rear of the bolt. With the rod end in the receiver, carefully feed the spring into the bolt by compressing the spring as the bolt is brought back. Press the bolt down into the receiver and return the charging handle before completely down. Return the hammer assembly to the receiver, inserting the two front ears first. Before pressing into place, pull the charging handle all the way back and finish pressing the assembly into place. Once in place, return the plastic post to the rear of the receiver. Return the stock to the receiver and barrel and return the screws. Return the brass magazine tube and check for function. That's it. True Gun Values assigns the Marlin Model 60SB a new gun value of $340 and a used gun value of $320 today. Actual sales this year have been between $275 and $320, so pretty much in the same ballpark. Now, before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. Produced since 1960 and only recently discontinued, the Marlin Model 60 is an iconic .22 rifle with legendary high popularity. The four main features of this particular rifle are its all-weather stainless steel construction, the Model 60's micro-groove rifling for impressive accuracy, groove receiver for scope mount, and last shot bolt hold open system. And while there are relatively few aftermarket accessories available, the Model 60 still has what is essential to satisfy most needs. Basically, it's an economical, rugged, reliable, accurate, no frills .22 rifle. Unfortunately, my original Ruger 10-22 rifle is a way too distant memory, and I haven't had opportunity to get reacquainted with one. As such, personally, I can't really say that the Marlin Model 60 is better than the Ruger 10-22, but judging the Marlin 60SB on its own, I admit I like it. It's basic, it's reliable, and it's really accurate. I like its feel and how it handles, and equipped with this scope, it's amazing, and I even like how it looks. It also makes me smile because I've only got about $250 total invested, scope and all. And I know I'm not alone in my view, given that over a period of 60 years, 11 million of these rifles were made. Sure, maybe I'm just being a little nostalgic today because this gun does remind me a bit of my youth. But the fact remains that the Marlin Model 60 rifle is undeniably one of the most popular and iconic .22 rifles of all time. And after having owned one for a few months, I can understand why. Any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.